Hi, I'm Zeb. I'm reviewing the second edition of Game of Thrones by Fantasy Flight Games. This is set during the War of the Five Kings in Westeros, and the objective of the game, you play as one of the different houses. There are 6 that come with the game. There are the Starks, the Baratheons, the Lannisters, the Tyrells, the Martells, and the Greyjoys. And each of these houses is jockeying to basically rule over the kingdom. You do this by accumulating strongholds and castles, warring it out with your neighbors. This is a very tense, very involved strategy game, not unlike diplomacy, actually. It borrows many of its ideas and components, although it also throws in a lot of flavor from the series, too. This is one of my favorite strategy games, though it's also one of my most committed ones. So, including the game, you have many different components that go into it. Little sheets to hide your units and special orders, so one for each of the great houses. The main board itself, which shows the entirety of Westeros and its oceans. You have all the components for the 6 different houses. These include little order tokens. So, for example, these Greyjoy order tokens are shown like this. When you flip them over, you can see what they are. There are influence tokens. Each house has one. They're represented by these little shield icons. Each house has its own distinctive cards. These cards are used in combat, so all of them are specific and appropriate to the houses. So, for example, one of House Stark's most powerful ones, Eddard Stark. He grants significant bonuses in combat. Each house they're all basically the same in terms of the bonuses that they grant, although they also have little hidden special abilities that also, I feel like, sync up well with how the series actually works. Finally, you have the army tokens. Over here, you have 4 basic types. There is the footman, as shown by the little icon of the man. You have the knight, the little horse. You have the ship, and then you have the little siege engine. How to play the game. Every house has a starting position with a certain number of units and stronghold, or castles and strongholds under its control. So, for example, House Stark, according to the information on the back of their little sheet, has a knight and a footman in Winterfell, 1 knight in White Harbor, 1 ship in the Shivering Sea, and that's it. Those are their starting armies. In the course of a turn, here's how it plays out. You draw from these 3 event decks. So, for example, on this one, Supply. Supply determines how many armies you can continuously maintain in the field. So House Stark can have an army of 3 and an army of 2. It's at Supply 1. As it brings more areas under its control, namely areas with the little barrels, so if it went to Widow's Watch or the Stony Shore, then it would, when the supply card comes up, it reconciles and its supply increases accordingly. So let's say my footman was there, I have 1 there. My supply is now at 2. It gets reconciled from that, and I could have that many armies. So it's in your interest to carefully guard your supply lines. As these events go up, there are other ones, such as Game of Thrones. Each player collects 1 power token for each area they control. Power, these little shield icons again, they're used to bid on these tracks here. I'll get to those in a moment. Once a turn has been decided, players set orders. So there are 5 kinds of orders in the game. You have, in order, Raid, March, Support, Defend, and Consolidate Power. Each of them does something different. Raid icons remove Support and Consolidate Power or other raid icons. March lets you move. Depending on the type you play, it also grants you a bonus or a penalty to combat. So a March -1, if I were to send this unit against this unit, they all move in, I can split them up as I like, and they attack with a -1 penalty. Support, you can support a combat in an adjacent area. So if I had a support icon here, and Baratheon tries to move in there, these guys would add their bonus to that combat. In this case, Baratheon is probably up Shit Creek. You have defense icons. They're pretty self-explanatory. They grant a bonus on defense. And finally, Consolidate Power. Consolidate Power gives you one of the power tokens, and then for each crown in the area, it grants you an additional one. So if I Consolidate Power in Winterfell, I would get 2. If I Consolidate Power in Widow's Watch, I would only get 1. There are 3 so-called influence tracks over here that determine that shape gameplay. There's the Iron Throne, the Fiefdoms track, and the King's Court track. The Iron Throne determines player order, so Baratheon, his orders will go off, and then number 2, number 3, and number 4. There's the Fiefdoms track. Fiefdoms determines who wins ties in combat. The holder of the Valyrian Steel Blade also can add 1 to 1 combat. King's Court, the starred orders, for example, on this Consolidate Power, that's a special order. Depending on where you are at King's Court, that's how many starred orders you can play. The holder of the Messenger Raven, which is the person on the number 1 track, can also change 1 order once everything gets revealed. So, in a turn, you put your orders down in secret. We'll say that these guys will consolidate power, and then these guys will defend, and these guys will, I don't know, they'll raid, although there's no reason for them to do so. Then, once every player has set their orders are flipped over and revealed. And they happen according to the sequence of the type of orders. So at first, raid orders go off. So if there was something nearby to raid, his gets used. They go one at a time. So 1 raid order, then it would go to the player after me, and back again, around and around until all of them are exhausted. The same applies to march orders. In the course of gameplay, it's important to remember ships. Ships are actually critical for how you move along, because you can use them to chain troops. So if I had a ship here and a ship here, I could move troops there all the way to there in the course of a single turn. They make you very mobile. You can also assist combats from the sea on land. So for example, if Baratheon was here and my ship here was playing in a support order, they would get a +1 bonus from that being there. Again, positioning is extraordinarily important in this game. The game ends when players reach 7 strongholds. There's a victory track here. The game ends immediately according to the rulebook. So House Stark starts with 2 strongholds. They have one at Winterfell and one at White Harbor. Different houses have different starting setups. The game goes for 10 turns. In the event of a tie, it goes off. The winner is determined first by the number of strongholds. Secondly, is by their position on the supply track, and then third, if it really comes down to it, by how many influence tokens they have left. Influence tokens have 2 big uses in the game. One, if you leave an area, so we'll say my guys in Widow's Watch want to go back to White Harbor, you can put down an influence token if you have one to maintain control of that area. If an enemy unit moves in there, it's lost. All it does is reflect is that you've left advisors behind to control it. They're also used to bid on these tracks. So within the card deck, there are a few that will call for bidding on any of the tracks. You take up however many influence tokens you have, you announce, generally speaking, to all the rest of the players how many you have, and then you bid on secret on each of them. So we'll say that I have 5. When it gets to the Iron Throne, we secretly bid. We put however many we want in our hand. Once everybody has placed their bid, you reveal. We'll say I bid 2. If I bid the most, then my position will be reflected accordingly. The holder of the Iron Throne decides ties, except in combat, and then he can allocate people if there are ties where he sees fit, basically. Rinse and repeat for fiefdoms and King's Court. That's the basic gist of the game. So one last thing to show, I'd like to show a combat. We'll say that, for whatever reason, House Baratheon has decided to pick a fight with House Stark. So he's going in with 3 strength. I have a total of 4 strength there, plus the garrison in Winterfell. Key cities for each player have a garrison that assigns a certain strength value. Once it's defeated, it never comes back. The odds aren't looking pretty for House Baratheon in this fight. I've got 2, 3, 4, 6. Now we each pick a card in secret and play it. So I'm pretty confident of victory under the circumstances. In fact, if I play a 2, I know he can't beat me because his highest value card is a 4. So we'll say that he really just has a hard-on for me on this one. We put them down in secret and then reveal. I played Roose Bolton. He grants me 2 strength. He played Stannis Baratheon. That gives him 4 strength. He is at 7, and I am at 8. I win the combat. Ties, again, are decided by the holder of the Valyrian Blade. When a unit retreats, they're placed on their side. to indicate that they've retreated, they don't grant any combat strength for the rest of that round. If they're attacked again, they're destroyed. So you want to safeguard your units. Certain characters can also kill. So for example, if I had played Eddard Stark instead of Roose Bolton, those two swords indicate 1 casualty each if you win. In this case, House Baratheon's army would have been annihilated. That's the basic gist of gameplay. There is one more factor, that's the Wildling track. Certain cards will increase the Wildling track. It will move from 0 to 2 to 4 to 6, and then occasionally there will be an actual Wildling attack. When this happens, everybody takes up the influence tokens they have. They have to either equal or surpass the amount pictured here. So if the Wildling strength is at 8, collectively all the players have to come up with 8 influence to try to fight them off. If they win, good stuff happens to the highest bidder. If they lose, really bad stuff can happen to the lowest bidder. So, for example, on Mammoth Riders, if there's a Wildling victory, the lowest bidder destroys 3 of his units anywhere, which is a potentially crippling situation if you have to give up an army holding something. What do I think of this game? I love it. I will say, I don't like it with 3 or 4 players. 3, basically what happens is the front runner just gets ganged up on by the 2 people behind him, and then they fight it out. It's not particularly interesting. 4 is still a little low. I like it with 5 and 6. I like having as many players going at it as possible. If you're a Game of Thrones nerd like I am, and I am, then it doesn't seem like it, but there are actual lots of little touches of flavor. House Tyrell can rapidly expand with supply. They can get 2 there, 1 there, 2 there. They can field huge armies. Greyjoy, because they're so isolated, almost has to be offensive every game. They're really focused on just taking another player down. Martell is particularly dangerous. The Starks are isolated. Lannister and Baratheon almost always end up ripping each other's throats out. So it actually plays out a lot like you'd like the War of the Five Kings to do. One rule I really don't like: when a player reaches 7 castles or stronghold, they instantly win. I think that encourages stupid tactics, to be honest. I think that encourages suicidal blitzkriegs. So the rule that most of the groups I play and use, you win when you get to 7 and hold it for the rest of the turn. Because I think that encourages a little more long-term strategy. It also is just discouraging to be in a position where somebody blitzes to 7, and you know that there's no way they could even hold it for the rest of the turn, but so what? It cheapens the game, I think, to play with their rule. Other than that, I recommend this game pretty highly. It is intensive. Be prepared for 4-hour games if you're all moving quickly. Make sure you read the rule book before you start playing. But if you like strategy, or if you love Game of Thrones, this is the game for you.